John 6?
Yes.
Ain't jumping in front of me.
No, nobody's jumping in front of you.
Alright. There is a girdle of skin, of a skin about his loins, and he did eat locusts and wild honey.
Nope, that's the what focus?
Last time.
What's the focus? Matthew 3 and 4. And the same John had his raiment of camel's hair and a leathern girdle about his loins, and his meat was locusts and wild honey. Leathern girdle is a belt, and it fits on the waist, and locusts and honey was his food. Let's see, there has been just a little bit of debate going on about whether John really ate bugs or not. And so I find it fascinating that he started to show me here leather, and then I seen a video about a man touring Israel, and there was a locust tree, and I said, never heard of a locust tree, locust bugs, but not the tree. So then I just kind of followed the spirit, and I didn't know where it was going, really didn't. I was like, this does not even, sound good. So let's see. And then Leviticus 11:22 is the law. Yes, Bible search tonight.
Leviticus what?
11. Yes. Give everyone a second to get there and see who wants to read it. Part of the problem that comes from everyone's debate is the language. What translates to what? The Greek says it's one thing. Arabic says it's one thing. Jews say it's another thing. And so here we find that God gives permission to eat certain things. So this is a big debate over if this grasshopper or a locust has flesh. So who wants to read it?
Even these of them ye may eat, the locust after his kind, and the bold locust after his kind. The bold locust after his kind, and beetle after his kind, and the grasshopper after his kind. Keep reading.
But all other flying, creeping things which shall have 4 feet shall be an abomination unto you. And that leads to a whole nother realm of locust topic. So it's fascinating to me. So here he gives Moses the commandments to give to the people, and it says what? You may eat a locust, flat out. No, I don't have a problem with that. It's right there. Yep. Black and white. I don't know why we have such a dilemma about it. Over Muslims, Arabia, or is that what they call them? I always call them some Iranians. Okay, Iranians, now we're together. They still eat locusts as a common food source. Usually they boil it or fry it. So we'll go maybe into that a little bit later, but let me try to stay on one topic. So they still eat it in the Middle East. About this carob tree, has anyone heard of it? So the Iranians believe that John ate a type of beans from the locust tree. So investigation leads to that is also called St. John's bread. which is kind of interesting to me. It thrives in a dry climate, and it grows in the Mediterranean. Believe that. The fruit of the tree is called a pod, and it's edible. DEVOUR, carob. If you want to look it up later. It looks like a dried out banana, and it can be like 12 inches long. And the pulp that comes out of it is sweet. And let's see, and if you grind it in a grinder, you get your powder format, which they mix in drinks or to flavor something. It tastes like chocolate, they said. I highly doubt it tastes like our chocolate, but they say that this tastes a lot like chocolate. Where else was I going? Sorry. Won't come to me. So Greeks, they say that here that locust is really a honey cake. And so a honey cake to the Greeks is translated manna. And so what would you say about manna? What do we all know about manna? Food from heaven, and it was brought down by quail to God's people, and they were in the wilderness, and so therefore it can't be man-made. It was God-made and dropped down here. So I can see how someone would get that mixed up. We'll go to Exodus 16:31, and the way that they describe manna is interesting. 16 and 31. Want to read it? Okay.
And the house of Israel called the name thereof manna, and it was like coriander seed, white, and and the taste of it was like waffle. Well, I'm thinking waffle.
That's all right. We're thinking breakfast. The title of this is actually What's for Breakfast.
Okay. Wafers made with honey.
Okay, so yes, you can. You're fine. You're just in a group. So, what kind of manna are they talking about?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So the people rested on the seventh day, and the house of Israel called that place manna. It's a place. And that's a place of where they picked all the manna up. And so now it's a building. Interesting. I said, okay, what does that have to do with it, Lord? So, and then our next thing, coriander seed, does not say carob seed. It says coriander seed plainly. And it also tastes like wafers of honey. Okay. I can see how you can easily put that all into one ball of wax and come up with a lot of different outcomes. Let's turn to keep your place. We might come back there. Numbers 11 and 7. 7 and 8. Still trying to see how this is related to locust that John ate in the wilderness. And it brings us here. How about Sabrina, you want to read 7 and 8?
And the manna was the coriander seed, and the collar thereof was the collar of Bdellium.
Bdellium.
And the
Bdellium. Bdellium. There you go.
And the people went about and gathered it and ground it in the mills and beat it in a mortar and baked it in pans, and made cakes of it, and the taste of it was as the taste of fresh oil.
Okay, so you can get oil, apparently. You can call that pulp, or you can call that honey. Depends on what consistency. You know, I can see that. Bdellium. Have you heard of that? That was one of those. Wow, really? I've never seen that word before, ever. And so, of course, curious minds need to search. So we'll get to that. What is a mortar?
It's like little crush up stuff with it.
Very good. You know what I thought mortar was? You put bricks together with it.
That's what it is.
And I'm like, what? That don't make any sense then, does it? So, but yes, it is. And they would made it out of hard clay mud, like a clay pot. That's what I found out. It was clay pot, and they used like a rock to grind. Same way they did with Hezekiah and his boils off of the fig tree. Similar situation. What else do I want?
It says in verse 10, I mean 9, when the two fell upon the camp in the night, the manna. Now what that mean?
This is they're talking about the actual manna that comes down. But over here in Exodus 16:31 is where the people gathered the manna. So they're calling that place. But you know, that's the way they did altars and stuff. They called them by different names or the same name as something else.
Well, when we have, this might be plumb off base, but when we have, communion, what are those wafers that we eat? I thought somebody said one time it was like manna.
It's like unleavened stuff, right?
Yeah, communion bread is the bread of life, the flesh from Jesus.
I know,
And
but
it's-
what is it actually? It don't have yeast or anything in it.
No, it's unleavened because of the sin, but it's crushed. I don't know if it was barley or
I think it's crushed
Wheat.
like some That's what they say.
yeah, and then it's cooked. I do remember that it was cooked with herb. So, and it was bitter herb. So coriander and cilantro are bitter herbs. And coriander is in the same family as cilantro. So, yes, if they had that, they'd put that on manna and make bread. But it also said that they're going to gather up some to save for future generations.
I'm just making sure when we do that, I ain't eating no locusts.
We don't want to eat locusts. Well, we can. All right. So, humor the Holy Spirit. That's what I thought. I'm going to go to Genesis. I'm just going to check that out. It can't be anything to do with locusts, you know, in John. But, you know, okay. I think it's 2 and 12. Let's see if I can. Yes, 2 and 12. All right, Lord. 2 and 12, I thought. And I'm clear back in Genesis 2. I don't know what you're going to pull out, but okay. This poor little Bible.
2 and 12.
Mm-hmm.
And the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone.
Okay. I said, well, Lord, that's great. Now that tells me bdellium could be a stone of some type. And the onyx stone is very important. Because the onyx stone is found further. Let's see if I can manna. Let's try to get to the scripture. I need an assistant. Exodus 28, 9, and 10. Okay, we'll go back over there. You know, just searching out bdellium, you know, or however you want to say it. Some expert could tell us. What did I say? 28 times.
9 and 10.
Yep, 28, 9, and 10.
And thou shalt take 2 onyx stones and grave on them the names of the children of Israel, 6 of their names on one stone, and the other 6 names of the rest on the other stone, according to their birth.
Okay, good. So here we see that the ones that was introduced in Genesis is now being used to mark the governments or the territories that God separated his children in. And they say that each government is made of 6 things even today, or made up of 12. Most likely you have to have some way to treat medically. Most likely you have somebody run the money. Somebody has to know how to do the communication. And somebody has to know how to do army stuff. And then there was one other thing that they had to handle. Consumption, I think was the other one. So I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. I'm really liking that. So let's go back to Numbers 11. On it. Was that where it told us myrrh, that was like myrrh? Okay. So 7 and 8, remember, it says, the manna was coriander seed, was as, that's a simile, coriander seed, and the color thereof was the color of an onyx stone, or bdellium. All right, so what is bdellium? So let me see what I wrote down about bdellium. Oh, and then I have to take you there. I forgot that one. That one was real interesting. But it is a fragrant resin produced by a number of trees found in the Middle East. So it's myrrh. It's used as perfume. This one I can sit back. It's used as perfume, and it grows Middle East. It grows like sap that comes off the tree. Like myrrh has a teardrop formation, and so they call it tears of heaven. And so, the Iranians call it their tree of tears. So the difference is the environment. One is in Egypt, where they were for a good long time before they went to the wilderness for 400 years. This one, though, bdellium, you can put it in the sun and let the sun heat it, and it turns to liquid, and the liquid tastes similar to honey. And they also use it as incense. Let's see. It helps with circulatory things and imbalances that the body has. Helps swelling and weeping wounds. So then that took me to the Jewish dictionary. And the Jewish dictionary condemns the locust bug because they say that it was flesh, and that eating of the flesh is a sin according to the law of Moses. And they also have a problem with the King James Bible believing, because they do not believe, they believe in James, the brother of Jesus. They believe in Jesus, but they don't believe in Paul, and they don't believe Jesus is the Messiah. So let's look at Romans 14, because they claim that this verse is jives with that part, but you know what I tell you. This is all about Jesus. But I said, okay, I'll just do it anyways. Gotta be going somewhere. It's pretty neat. him that is weak in the faith receive ye, but not the doubtful disputations. For one believeth that he may eat all things, another who is weak eat herbs. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let not with him which eateth not judge him that eateth, for God hath received him. 4. Who art thou that judgest another man's servant? To his own master he standeth or falleth. He shall be holded up, for God is able to make him stand. The Jews here are still fighting with the Gentiles and with Paul, and Paul just simply says, you can eat anything you want to, pretty much. Try not to offend each other. That's not the focus of food anymore. So, but there was, in the day of John, a group of people, and they were called Ebionites. And Ebionites were they were the vegetarians. But Jews will tell you that Jesus and his crew only ate vegetables, that they didn't eat any meat. So therefore, John the Baptist, who came before Jesus, he didn't eat meat, so he surely couldn't eat locusts, because locust is flesh. But says you can. You know, says you can. So these Ebionites, they also believed some in that they were Christian Jews, but they started their ministry at Matthew 3. They admired James, the brother, but they rejected Apostle Paul because he was against the law. They just wanted everybody to get along. So, continuing down the rabbit trail, the bread of heaven is called what? Manna. And let's see, Genesis 2:12. Does it mention Havana or Havilah? Havilah. Because that tells us where this Bdellium is. And we all know that Egypt, Ethiopia, Iraq, Iran, Turkey is the land of gold, because it's got liquid gold and gas and petroleum or whatever that stuff is, natural oil. So did it say anything about that word?
It says, and the golden that is there is Bdellium, and the Atlantic stone.
Must be mine. It's hers. Okay, we figured out which one it is. All right. So, it's found in Havilah, and I recognized that word from the people that tried to discover where the Garden of Eden is. And so they would, one of the studies, so see the connections, I mean, it's just connecting. And so I thought, well, okay, let's give it some thought. Havana is still in India primarily. But there are 4 main bodies or heads of bodies of water, I think is how it is in Scripture. And so the Nile and the Euphrates River, the Nile goes through Africa. And guess where he was? He was, John came about 6 months before Jesus, right? He was born from Elizabeth. And King Herod, or Herod, he said, okay, go kill all the 2-year-olds. Because he was a mean and nasty king and was like way out of his mind. He even killed all of his own kids, so let's kill everybody else's too. It doesn't matter to him. Because he was worried about people stealing his money, and that's what it all stemmed from. He even killed his wife. So we know that Elizabeth took John into the wilderness, and she couldn't have went really far to hide out so that her baby would be saved. And I was looking for, let's see, 2 Corinthians 6:17. How about John 1:23? Yes, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
He said, I am the voice of the one crying in the wilderness. Make straight the way of the Lord. As he said the prophet Isaiah. You keep going?
Nope. I just wanted to make that connection that he was in the wilderness. And what else? Does that connect? Read it to me one more time.
He said, I am the voice of the one crying in the wilderness. Make straight way of the Lord, as said the prophet Isaiah.
Okay. And who has 2 Corinthians?
What did you say?
2 Corinthians 6:17.
Wherefore came out from among them, and be separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you.
Okay. So somebody tell me 2 Kings 1:8. And then we have Zechariah 13 and 14. Only thing at this point that I've seen is a full circle about the beginning of a locust. And it starts with John in the wilderness, and it takes us all the way back to manna in Egypt, and possibly the beginning of the 3 heads of water, where where God's children went, and it leads us right back to the Nile, where John was born and raised. And so now we need to realize how his dress and what he ate was so important that Scripture actually mentioned it. Because Scripture does not usually tell us what they are wearing, or how she wore her hair that day, or brushed her teeth the other day, you know. Who has it for me? 2 Kings.
I didn't get it. I jumped to
Anybody?
1:8.
1:8.
He was a hairy man, and girt with a girdle of leather about his loins, and he said, It is Elijah the Tishbite.
Okay, so we see that there's a connecting prophet that was also dressed in animal skin with a leathern belt. And let's see, camel's hair. How about Zechariah 13 and 14? Who's this one about?
Was that chapter 13?
Yes.
13 and 14.
Let's see if that's, yeah. What does
14 goes to 9.
Yes. Does it have anything to do with a dress code?
And you want 9 do she is?
13,
Yeah. You
14,
said 13 and 9?
14.
Okay. Yeah, it ain't no, I guess it goes to 9 verses
Okay, so
14.
let's try the ZEC reference. Does that ring a bell? ZE, is that Zechariah?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you're at?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm thinking that it might have been. We'll have to come back to that one. But the fact, we'll just go with it. The fact that there was one dressed before him like that because they needed to be identified as God's chosen vessels. And it relates to what Jessica read to us, because that tells us that we also need to be separate and we need to act and look like Christians. And so I have a reference for Matthew 11 and then Zechariah 13:54.
It could have been Zephaniah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You said it was 1354? So it must be the Zephaniah. However you pronounce it.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm like, ah. So I'll have to look. I'm gonna look that one up. Maybe we'll have it by the time we meet again. Matthew 11:8. Is that wrapped up for you? It was one of those, looks like wrapping up verses.
11:8.
Yes.
But what went ye out for to see? A man clothed in soft raiment. Behold, they that wear soft clothing are in kings' houses. So, you keep reading.
Yes.
But
Just a
what
couple
went
more.
ye out for to see? A prophet. Yea, I say unto you, and more than a prophet. For this is he of whom it is written, Behold, I send my messenger before thy face, which shall prepare thy way before thee.
Very good. John questioned just like we do, how am I, Lord? Prove it to me that I'm, qualified or whatever to loose the shoes of Jesus and baptizing. I think it goes with his dress and his raiment. Most of our prophets lived in the wilderness, and they ate what was in the wilderness. So I think that, yes, he did eat locusts, and he did have some type of honey. So let's mention coriander, or not coriander, but the health benefits of coriander. Anybody know what coriander does for you in your body? I'd use it for two reasons. And I'm going to try to put it nicely. I take a veggie cap and I put 2 drops and I swallow that. And it removes toxins from your body, so it helps you. It helps me. Okay? That's how I'm going to put it. It also relieves symptoms of like indigestion and baby colic. So that's what they used for colicky babies. And the other reason that coriander is the best is because I have constant trouble with blood clots. And so does my whole family, my grandmother and my mother. But it helps your circulatory system work. It helps thin your blood and thin your arteries so that it keeps it clean and your blood can go through, which also helps my blood pressure stay pretty even. I'm not a diabetic, but it curbs your appetite. It curbs your wanting for sugars. So I'm thinking that's going to go somewhere down the line to help diabetics, because they have trouble with sugar, starch, and a bunch of other things. I know I've read that somewhere, but I don't remember where. But those. I'd like to say the reasons I use it. That's because I know that's best. Yeah. Are we done tonight? We want some more meat. Hopefully it's meat for you. Because we'll go with describing a locust, or what was God's purpose of creating the locust. The Bible first mentioned locusts with Mr. Pharaoh, because Pharaoh wouldn't let his people go, and that was after he's already seen like the blood, like the Nile River turn to blood and turn red a few times, but he had the locust come because the locust eats everything. I can see just black swarms. I've looked on the internet of just black swarms that come through there, and they leave absolutely nothing. Believe it or not, the locusts attack Egypt more than anywhere else in the world, and they eat all vegetation, so therefore the people starve, the animals starve. So then they started to grind up these pests and feed them to their animals, so that at least they would have some kind of nutrition. The one in the United States, as far as an attack, has been the Great Plains, and it was around the 1900s, into the 1800s, and they flew in and took everything. And so these people, they covered their crops with thick fabric and whatever else, leather, and they ate through it and still ate the crop. They ate wool from sheeps. So they're really bad. There was off Greece. There's an island off Greece. They totally had to evacuate because there was nothing left for the islanders to eat, and all the vacationers, everybody was kicked off the island. Big news. And then in Sunday school, I mentioned Thomas. He's from Arizona, and he swears that he was bit by the locust. And 5 weeks he traveled from doctor to doctor to try to figure it out. And so Fox News has a picture of him with his arms outspread, and it's nothing but bruises. So this then connects to Revelations, and maybe one had escaped from the smoke, just like as a warning, is what Bible people were saying. They were kind of a little bit scared about that. So they were here to be an army that destroys. And in Revelations, that's exactly what they are. And John described them as what he saw. But what truly, if you look at one, they look like they are wearing armor. So, and they do make a noise, loud, like voice of men. So there's a lot for us to study on that end as well. And Exodus 5:2 is where it is.
What was it?
5:2.
5:2.
Africa. These have been, the scientists have reported that they even communicate with each other. And I thought it was interesting that the news reports that I've read about, they always refer to the locust swarm as the ancient plague of Egypt. They do have a normal flying range migration. And in the United States, we see them every 7 or 10 years. Egypt sees them every 20, but when they see them and it takes out villages because they just can't feed their people. Ethiopia, Africa. And I think that's where we'll stop with description. So that'd probably be a good place to stop. This was interesting. In 2 Chronicles 7:13 and 14. It says, "When I shut up the heavens so there is no rain, or command the locust to devour the land, or send pestilence among my people, if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land." It doesn't seem like our government is headed down this path. But I know that my grandmother's house has been divinely protected.